The
You see,
morning
the thing
songbirds
about
outside
growing
my
older
window were
is
the
you
only
realize
music in
what
my
truly
house.
matters.
I'd spent
It's
the
not the
hours since
wealth you
dawn installing
accumulate,
an oak
but the
bookshelf,
love
and
you
the fresh
share.
scent of
You
wood,
see,
a
the
smell of
secret to
satisfaction,
navigating those
still
woods
hung in the air.
isn't speed,
At
it's
70 years
patience.
old, these hands hadn't
That's what the
forgotten
old
how to
timers
build
taught
something
us.
solid from
You reach an
scratch.
age where you
This wasn't
realize
just a
what truly
house.
matters.
It was my final
It isn't the
statement built
noise
on
of the
land my
world,
grandfather
but the
bought with
quiet
calloused
moments like
hands and
these.
hard-earned dollars. Every plank, every stone was steeped in the sweat and pride of the Wilson name. My name is Jack Wilson. I'm a retired civil engineer, and this house nestled among ancient oaks in northern Michigan represents everything I've worked for. The tablet on my workbench chimed, a dry digital sound that fractured the quiet. My daughter Sarah's face appeared on the screen, bright as a sunflower. But I know my daughter. I know that smile. It was too bright, trying too hard. Behind it was a cloud only a father could see. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice cheerful. "The house looks amazing. Are you all settled in?" "Just about, sweetheart," I replied, turning the tablet to show her the new bookshelf. "Just a few odds and ends. The air out here is incredible. Saw a deer in the backyard this morning." Sarah clapped weakly. "That's wonderful, Dad. I'm so happy for you." Her eyes darted to the side for just a second, then back. A familiar tell. Robert was there. And right on cue, another face pushed into the frame, filling it with a wide grin that seemed friendly but didn't reach his eyes. Robert Bennett, my son-in-law. "Morning, Jack," he said, his tone like he was talking to an employee. He never called me Dad. "Looks all right. Big improvement over the old apartment." I didn't respond to the backhanded compliment. My old apartment was where Sarah grew up, where the walls echoed with the laughter of my late wife, Martha. Robert didn't notice. He never noticed things that couldn't be valued in dollars. "Quick question for you," he said, glancing at Sarah, then locking his eyes on me. "Did you get the high-speed internet hooked up yet? My parents aren't used to slow connections. My mom needs it for her shows." I felt something tighten in my chest. A simple question, a practical question. But the delivery was all wrong. My parents aren't used to slow connections, as if their presence in my house, on my land, was a foregone conclusion, as if their comfort was the priority and my peace was an afterthought. Sarah jumped in quickly, her smile looking painful now. "He's just planning ahead, Dad. Patricia complains about that stuff." "I understand," I said, slowly keeping my voice even. "I'm on the basic plan. It's enough for me." Robert smirked. "Basic plan. Come on, Jack. It's the 21st century. You should upgrade. Think of it as an investment in the future. For when, well, for when guests come to visit. Everything needs to be ready. An investment in the future." The phrase hung in the air. He didn't say it, but I heard it. The future he was talking about wasn't mine. In his eyes, I was just the temporary caretaker of an asset that would soon be his. "I'll look into it," I lied. "Good." Robert nodded, satisfied. He patted Sarah's shoulder, a gesture more of ownership than affection. "Anyway, we gotta run. Got a showing over by the lake. People are paying crazy money for waterfront property these days." He winked at me. He winked at me. "Location is everything, right, Jack?" Then they were gone. The screen went dark. The house was quiet again, but now it was a tainted quiet. The smell of fresh oak no longer felt like satisfaction. It felt like the smell of something about to be taken. I looked out the window at the forest my grandfather taught me to respect. Robert didn't see trees. He only saw lots. The smoldering fire inside me, the one that had been just embers for years, had just been given a little gust of wind. And I knew this was only the beginning. The next day, I decided to spend some time unpacking the old boxes in the storage shed, the pieces of a life I'd carefully wrapped. I wasn't doing it just to clean. I was doing it to remember who I was. I opened a trunk labeled Jack's Office. On top lay my heavy metal T-square, its edges worn smooth from decades of use. I picked it up, feeling the familiar weight in my hand. Robert had seen it once at my old apartment and laughed. "Man, do people still use these? We've got CAD software for everything now." He said it not out of malice, but out of sheer ignorance. He couldn't understand that the bridges that spanned rivers, the skyscrapers that rose from the earth, all started with a single line drawn by a tool just like this. He didn't see the hard work, only the obsolescence. I set the T-square aside and pulled out a roll of old blueprints, The plans for the Memorial Bridge, my first project as lead engineer. I remembered the dedication ceremony. Martha stood beside me, her hand in mine, her eyes shining with pride. Sarah, just 6 years old, sat on my shoulders. "Did you build that, Daddy?" she had asked, her voice full of awe. "I did, Princess," I'd answered, "so everyone can get home safe." I remembered the first dinner Robert had at our home. He sat across from me at the dining table my own grandfather had built. After the initial pleasantries, his first real question wasn't about my work, not about my family. He asked, "So what does a civil engineer in this city pull in, Mr. Wilson?" Martha had kicked me gently under the table, a silent signal to keep my cool. I had answered politely, but I'd already made my first assessment of the man, a man measured not by what he builds, but by what he owns. I kept sorting. Another box, this one filled with old photographs. There was one of Martha and me on our wedding day. She was beautiful in a simple white dress. We didn't have much money, but we had everything. Underneath it was another photo taken years later on a camping trip. We were setting up a tent on this very piece of land where I now stood. Martha was laughing, her hair a mess from the wind. "Someday," she had said, "we'll build a house here, Jack, a place for us to grow old together." And I had done it. I had kept my promise, but I had to do it alone. I remembered the day Sarah called to tell me she'd accepted Robert's proposal. I had tried to be happy for her, but a small voice in the back of my head kept nagging me. I remembered the times Robert had casually mentioned his friends who were flipping properties in the suburbs for a quick profit. I remembered the times he'd asked about the zoning situation in this area, feigning a casual interest. I had dismissed those worries, telling myself I was being overprotective, an old man seeing shadows. I didn't want to create conflict. I found a small wooden box containing my medals and awards, the Distinguished Service Medal from the Engineer Society, a citation from the mayor's office for the downtown revitalization project. I used to have them on the wall in my study, but after Sarah and Robert moved into a larger house, she had gently suggested they looked a little boastful, and maybe I should put them away. "The style now is more minimalist, Dad," she had said. Robert stood behind her, nodding in agreement. I took them down, not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to embarrass my daughter. But now looking back, I realize it wasn't about style. It was about erasing my story, diminishing my accomplishments, so that Robert's could shine brighter. Every object I touched told a story of work and love and sacrifice. And every memory was tainted by Robert's presence like an oil slick on a clear pond. His disrespect wasn't a single act, but a slow grinding campaign that had gone on for years. It chipped away at Sarah's confidence. It reduced my legacy to a number on a balance sheet. And it did it all with a smile and a friendly pat on the back. I closed the trunk. The unpacking was done. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I had seen the individual pieces for years, but now in the quiet of this house, they had finally clicked together into a complete picture. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan, and I was standing right in the middle of it. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Sarah. No video call this time, just her voice small and tight like she was talking from inside a closet. "Dad," she whispered, "are you busy?" "No, sweetheart. What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my own voice calm. She hesitated. I could hear her uneven breathing on the other end of the line. "It's just, I have something to ask you. Well," her voice trailed off. "Go on, Sarah." "Well, Robert, he has this huge investment opportunity, really huge, Dad. A real estate deal that could change everything for us, for the kids' future." I stayed silent, waiting. I knew what was coming. "But he needs a little more capital to get in on it," she continued, her voice getting smaller. "The banks are being difficult because of the market. It's just a timing thing, but the opportunity won't wait. I was wondering if maybe you could loan us the money." A chill went down my spine. This was it. No more hints or casual questions about property values. This was a direct play. "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a long pause. I heard a muffled sound like she was covering the phone. 50,000, she finally breathed. "We'd pay you back as soon as the deal closes, probably within 6 months. With interest, of course." $50,000. It wasn't a small amount, but I could cover it. It was part of the nest egg I had built for my own old age, a cushion of security. But it wasn't about the money. Sarah, I said, my voice gentle but firm, my savings are to make sure that if anything ever happens, you and the grandkids are secure. It's a safety net, not a venture capital fund. But it's a sure thing, Dad, she said quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. Robert has researched it completely. He says it can't fail. There are no sure things in business. You know that, and I don't know Robert's partners or this project. I paused, choosing my words carefully. My money, the legacy from your mother and your grandparents, is for building on solid ground, not for gambling on the future. The silence on the other end was heavy. I didn't hear crying, just a hollow emptiness. I knew I had disappointed her, but I also knew that if I said yes, I wouldn't just be losing money. I would be losing the last of my authority. I would be conceding that Robert had a claim on what was mine. I understand, Dad, Sarah finally said, her voice devoid of emotion. I just thought I should ask. I love you, Sarah. I love you too, Dad. I have to go. The call ended. I sat there for a few minutes completely still. I didn't doubt Sarah's love for me, but I could see how trapped she was. She was trying to keep the peace between a father she loved and a husband who manipulated her. And in that tug of war, Robert was winning. This phone call wasn't just a refusal of a loan, it was a declaration. I had drawn a line in the sand, and I had a very bad feeling that Robert wasn't going to respect it. He was going to try to cross it or erase it completely. The smoldering fire now had fresh fuel. I knew a storm was coming. The phone rang 2 days after I had drawn my line in the sand. I was sitting on the porch watching the late afternoon sun filter through the tall pines, feeling a fragile sense of peace. I had made my decision about the loan, and while I knew it had hurt Sarah, it felt right. It felt like a boundary I needed to set. When I saw Robert's name on the screen, a knot formed in my stomach. I almost let it go to voicemail. A part of me, the part that still wanted to avoid conflict, screamed to just ignore it. But another part, a part that had been dormant for too long, knew I couldn't. I had to face this. I swiped to answer. Hello, Robert, I said, my voice steady. Jack got a minute. He didn't wait for an answer. Listen, I've got some great news. My parents sold their place in Florida. The deal closed yesterday. It all happened a bit faster than we expected, but it's a seller's market, you know. I said nothing. I could hear the fake enthusiasm in his voice, the practiced tone of a salesman about to close a deal you never wanted in the first place. So, he continued a little too brightly, they need a place to land. And Sarah and I were thinking, your new house is the perfect solution. It's got all that space, fresh air, exactly what they need. They'll be there at the end of the month. They're taking the master bedroom, the one with the balcony. Mom will love having her morning coffee out there. The world seemed to slow down. The sound of the birds, the rustle of the leaves, it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. I felt the smooth wood of the porch railing under my hand grounding me. Did he just say what I thought he said? He wasn't asking. He was informing. He spoke about my home, my master bedroom, the room I had designed with a rocking chair in the corner where Martha would have sat, as if it were a hotel room he had just booked online. The audacity of it was like a physical blow knocking the air from my lungs. I thought of my grandfather clearing this land with his bare hands. I thought of my father planting the very pine trees I was looking at now. I thought of Martha, her sketches for this house spread across our old kitchen table, her face lit with excitement. Every inch of this place was a testament to a legacy of love and hard work. And this man was talking about it like it was a vacant property, a convenience. For a moment, I was speechless. A hot, furious wave surged up from my chest, so intense it made my vision swim. I wanted to yell. I wanted to curse him with every foul word I knew. I wanted to tell him exactly what kind of parasitic, disrespectful leech he was. I wanted to tell him that he and his parents were not welcome within 100 miles of this sacred ground. But I couldn't get the words out. The rage was a log jam in my throat. He took my silence as agreement. Or perhaps he just didn't care enough to wait for a response. Sarah thinks it's a great idea, by the way, he added, twisting the knife. It'll be good for you to have some company. Keep you from getting lonely out there in the sticks. The condescension in his voice was sickening. He was painting me as a feeble old man who needed to be managed, whose own home was a resource to be allocated by him. He was erasing me from my own life. I finally found my voice, but it was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Robert, you can't be serious." He laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was sharp and dismissive. "Of course I'm serious, Jack. Look, I get that you like your quiet time or whatever, but this is what's happening. It's what's best for the family." And then he delivered the final blow, the one that shattered the last bit of my restraint. "Honestly, if you don't like it, you can always just go back to that cramped apartment in the city. It's not a big deal. Either way, this land is going to be Sarah's eventually, so you might as well get used to sharing." And there it was, the truth laid bare in all its ugly greed. I wasn't a father-in-law. I was an obstacle, a temporary occupant on his future property. My life, my wishes, my peace, they were all irrelevant details in his financial plan. In that moment, something inside me broke. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the dam that had been holding back a lifetime of quiet dignity, of turning the other cheek, of avoiding conflict for the sake of a fragile family peace. The hot rage that had been choking me suddenly vanished. It didn't fizzle out. It was replaced by something else entirely. A profound, chilling, and absolute calm. It was the calm of a general on the battlefield who finally sees the enemy's entire strategy and knows with perfect clarity exactly what he must do. Arguing with Robert would be pointless. It would be like reasoning with a storm. He wouldn't hear my words. He would only see them as a challenge to his power. Yelling would only give him the satisfaction of knowing he had gotten under my skin. Pleading would be a pathetic surrender of the very dignity I needed to reclaim. No, the only way to fight a man like Robert wasn't with emotion. It was with logic, with precision, and with a plan so meticulous and airtight that by the time he realized he was in a trap, the door would have already locked behind him. He thought he was giving me an ultimatum. He had no idea he was giving me a declaration of war. And in a war, the most powerful weapon is letting your enemy underestimate you. He saw me as a retired, sentimental old fool. Good. That fool was about to build one last project. Not a bridge of steel and concrete, but a cage. A perfect, inescapable cage crafted from Robert's own arrogance. I took a slow, deep breath. The roaring in my ears stopped. The world came back into sharp focus. I could see every needle on the pine trees. I could feel the cool evening air on my skin. I was no longer a victim of his announcement. I was in control. He was still talking, something about movers and schedules, but his voice was just background noise now. I let him finish. I let the silence hang in the air for a few heartbeats, letting him think he had won, letting him savor his victory. Then I spoke. My voice was even calm and completely devoid of the emotion he expected. "All right," I said. "Let them come. The cornered old men are the most dangerous." I didn't argue. I just smiled and told him I'd get the house ready for their arrival. But the surprise I prepared wasn't fresh linens and a welcome mat. It was a lesson in respect served cold. The next morning, I didn't wake up with anger. I woke up with a purpose. For the first time in years, the fog of quiet resignation had lifted, replaced by the sharp, clean focus of an engineer with a problem to solve. And this was the most important project of my life. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't call Robert. My first call was to a number I hadn't dialed in years, to the office of a woman who had been the daughter of a dear friend and colleague, a fellow builder named Marcus Morgan. He had passed away a few years back, but I knew his daughter had followed him into a different kind of construction. She built cases instead of bridges. Her name was Eliza. I drove into the city, the familiar skyline, a stark contrast to the quiet woods I had left behind. But I wasn't intimidated. I had helped build this city. My fingerprints were on its steel skeleton. Eliza Morgan's law office wasn't in one of the new glass towers Robert so admired. It was in a beautifully restored brick building downtown, a place with history and character, the kind of place that was built to last. When I was shown into her office, she stood to greet me. She had her father's intelligent eyes, but they held a sharpness that was all her own. She was young, maybe early 30s, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone much older. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her handshake firm, "it's an honor. My father spoke of you often. Please have a seat." I didn't sit right away. From my worn leather briefcase, I began to place items on her polished mahogany desk. I did it slowly, methodically. Each document was a piece of the foundation I was about to lay. First, I unrolled a delicate yellowed piece of paper. This, I said, my voice steady, is the original deed to the 100 acres of land my grandfather Samuel Wilson purchased in 1928. He bought it with 5 years of savings from working at the lumber mill. Eliza leaned forward, her eyes scanning the old elegant script. She didn't say a word, just absorbed the history. Next, I placed a thick bound portfolio next to the deed. These are my original hand-drawn architectural and structural plans for the house I just completed on that land. Every support beam, every joint, every nail was specified by me. I tapped the cover. It was designed to stand for a century. Then came the modern documents. A recent property appraisal, its value shockingly high. My complete financial statements showing my pension, my investments, and my savings. A detailed list of every major expense I had covered for Sarah and Robert over the past 10 years. College tuition, a down payment on their first home car's vacations. I had never kept a tally out of resentment, but out of a lifelong habit of meticulous record keeping. I had documented everything. Finally, I placed a small framed photo in the center of the collection. It was of Martha taken on the land the year before she passed. She was smiling, her face full of hope. That, I said softly, is the reason for all of this. I finally sat down. Eliza was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving from document to document, piecing together the story without me having to tell it. She wasn't looking at them like a lawyer scanning for loopholes. She was looking at them like an archaeologist studying a life. "My father said you were the most thorough man he ever knew," she said at last, looking up at me. "He said you could see a project's end from its very beginning. What is the project here, Mr. Wilson?" I took a breath. This was the critical moment. I couldn't let emotion cloud the objective. My son-in-law has informed me that he is moving his parents into my home at the end of the month. I began my tone as neutral as if I were describing a zoning issue. He has made it clear that he views my property as a future asset for him and my daughter, and that my own residency there is conditional on my compliance with his plans. Eliza's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding. "He believes he has all the leverage," I continued. "He is relying on my love for my daughter to keep me from creating conflict. He sees me as a retired old man who has run out of moves." I leaned forward slightly. "I am not here today to file a restraining order or to start a messy family lawsuit. That is what he would expect. That is a battle fought on his terms with emotion and drama. I prefer to fight on my terms." "And what are your terms?" she asked, her voice quiet but intense. "Structure, permanence, legacy," I said. "Robert thinks in terms of market value and quick profits. I think in terms of generations. That land has a unique ecosystem. It's a sanctuary for several species of migratory birds." My wife Martha was a passionate amateur botanist. She identified over 50 species of native plants on that property, some of them quite rare. I pointed to the photo of my wife. Her dream was that the land would always be a place of peace, a place that gives back more than it takes. My son-in-law sees a potential subdivision. I see a promise I made to her that I intend to keep. Eliza's gaze sharpened. I could see the legal mind at work now, the tumblers clicking into place. "You're not talking about a simple will or a trust for your daughter," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You're talking about something much more creative." "I'm a builder, Miss Morgan," I replied. "I've spent my life turning ideas into physical structures that last. I want to build a legal structure around that land, one that is permanent, ironclad, and serves a purpose greater than one family's financial gain. I want to explore my options for establishing a private conservation trust or a nonprofit foundation. I want to turn my home, my land, my entire estate into a living memorial for my wife, a sanctuary that is protected in perpetuity, managed by a board, and dedicated to environmental preservation and study." She leaned back in her chair, a look of genuine admiration in her eyes. "So when your son-in-law's parents arrive, expecting to take over the master bedroom," she began, "they will instead be arriving at the headquarters of a registered, legally protected nature preserve." I finished. "They won't be guests in their son-in-law's future house. They will be on private foundation property, subject to its rules and regulations." The smile on Eliza's face was now wide and bright. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice filled with a new energy, "this is the most elegant, most beautifully engineered solution I have ever heard of. It's not a defense, it's a checkmate." I believe in building things correctly from the ground up, I said. So tell me, Morgan, what kind of permits do we need to get started? For the next 2 hours, we weren't a client and a lawyer. We were two engineers, two builders poring over blueprints. We discussed the legal architecture, the tax implications, the bylaws of the new foundation. My meticulous records gave her everything she needed. My vision gave her a clear objective. When I left her office that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. The first chess piece was not just on the board. It had been placed with such strategic precision that my opponent didn't even know the game had begun. He was still celebrating a victory in a battle he thought he had already won. He had no idea I had changed the entire war. The days that followed my meeting with Eliza were a quiet storm of activity. I worked from the small office in my new home, the room Martha would have called her study. The same sun that warmed my back as I sat at the desk also powered my new resolve. I had a list written on a crisp yellow legal pad. It wasn't a to-do list. It was a battle plan. Each item was a component, each phone call a step in the construction of my fortress. My first call was to a Dr. Mason Hayes, an environmental consultant whose name Eliza had given me. He was a professor at the State University, a man whose entire life was dedicated to the kind of preservation Martha had so admired. Dr. Hayes, I began, my voice clear and professional. My name is Jack Wilson. I am the steward of a 100-acre parcel of old-growth forest in the foothills. I am in the process of establishing a private conservation trust, and I require a comprehensive ecological survey. I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. A private trust, that's ambitious, Mr. Wilson. What are you looking to achieve? I want to achieve permanence, I said simply. My late wife was a botanist. She documented dozens of species of flora on the property. We have a significant population of migratory songbirds that nest here each spring. I want to know what it would take to have the area formally designated as a protected habitat. I need to know about long-term monitoring equipment, trail cameras, and soil and water testing protocols. We spoke for nearly an hour. He used words like biodiversity, riparian zones, and keystone species. I used words like foundation, structure, and longevity. We were speaking different languages, but we understood each other perfectly. He saw a chance to protect a piece of the natural world. I saw a way to honor my wife and build a wall so high my son-in-law could never climb it. My next call was to a company called Helios Off-Grid Solutions. A young, energetic man answered, "What can we do for you today?" "I have a 2,000 square foot residence," I explained. "I want to take it completely off the public utility grid. I need a solar array and battery storage system with enough capacity to handle 100% of the property's electrical needs year-round. The most important thing is reliability and independence. When the power goes out in the county, my lights need to stay on." He was impressed. "That's a serious system, sir. Most people just want to lower their bill. You're talking about creating your own power plant." "I'm talking about self-sufficiency," I corrected him. "I want to control the flow of energy on my own land." We talked about kilowatt hours, battery chemistry, and inverters. I was back in my element discussing technical specifications and system redundancies. As I was making notes on the solar proposal, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Robert. A wave of irritation washed over me, but I quickly suppressed it. I answered with the same calm, even tone I had used all morning. "Hello, Robert." "Jack, just checking in," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Wanted to see how you're doing. Not getting too spooked out there all by yourself." "I'm keeping busy, Robert," I said, looking at my list. "Oh yeah? What are you up to, tidying up the guest rooms?" He chuckled. "Mom's bringing her own linens, by the way. She's very particular about thread count." The sheer triviality of his concerns compared to the gravity of what I was actually doing was almost comical. He was worried about bedsheets while I was fundamentally altering the legal and physical reality of the ground beneath his feet. "I'm just getting the place ready," I said, the words tasting like sweet irony in my mouth. "Making a few upgrades to make sure everything is in order for their arrival." "Good man," he said, the approval in his voice like a pat on the head for a dog. "That's the spirit. Knew you'd come around. Sarah was a little worried you were upset, but I told her you just needed some time to adjust. It's a big change, I get it." I felt a flash of anger on Sarah's behalf. He was using her as a shield, painting her as the fragile one, while he was the one causing all the turmoil. I'm fine, Robert. Just want to make sure your parents are comfortable. Excellent. That's all I wanted to hear. All right, I'll let you get back to it. Don't work too hard, old man. He hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment. Old man, he used the term like an insult, a synonym for irrelevant. He had no idea that this old man was using a lifetime of experience to outmaneuver him at every turn. He saw me puttering around a house. He didn't see me building a fortress. I drew a firm line through the first two items on my list and moved to the third. My final call of the day was to a local firm, Wildland Security. I spoke to the owner. I'm the trustee of a new nature preserve, I said. We're having some issues with trespassing, and I'm concerned about poachers. I need a comprehensive security solution. What did you have in mind? The owner asked. I want the main access road gated, I said. An automated gate controlled remotely by me. I want motion-activated night vision cameras covering all property lines, not to watch people, but to monitor wildlife and any unauthorized human activity. The system needs to be discreet but effective. The goal here is access control. We need to be able to lock the preserve down completely if necessary for the protection of the habitat and the residents, the owner added. Of course, I said, and the residents. We finalized the details for the installation. When I hung up the phone, the sun was beginning to set. I looked at my list. The ecological survey was scheduled. The solar installation was being quoted. The security system was ordered. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the darkening woods. Robert thought I was preparing a house for his parents. He was wrong. I was preparing a cage, a self-sustaining, legally protected, electronically monitored cage. And the bait was the one thing he couldn't resist, the illusion of a free ride. A week later, I found myself back in Eliza Morgan's office. The air this time was different. The first meeting had been about possibilities, about sketching a blueprint. Today was about pouring the concrete. On the large mahogany desk between us sat a stack of documents nearly 3 inches thick. It was bound in a simple professional blue cover. On the front in gold lettering were the words, "The Martha Wilson Conservation Trust." It looked solid, official, and permanent. It looked like something my wife would have been proud of. Eliza sat opposite me, a notary public seated quietly beside her. She had a calm, serious expression on her face. This wasn't just another case for her. I could tell she understood the weight of what we were about to do. "Jack," she began, her voice formal, "before we proceed, I need to make sure you are fully aware of the nature of this action. Once you sign these documents and they are filed with the state, the transfer is irrevocable. You will be legally transferring ownership of your land, your home, and a significant portion of your liquid assets into the trust. You will no longer be the individual owner. You will be the resident trustee bound by the bylaws and mission statement we have created." She looked at me intently. "Do you understand this?" I looked from her determined face to the formidable stack of paper. For a fleeting moment, a sliver of doubt entered my mind. Was this too extreme? Was I sacrificing my own freedom to prove a point? Then I thought of Robert's voice on the phone, so full of dismissive arrogance. I thought of Sarah, trapped and unhappy. And I thought of Martha, her dream of a peaceful sanctuary. The doubt vanished, replaced by the same cold hard certainty I'd felt after that fateful call. "I understand completely, Eliza," I said. "This is not just something I want to do. It is something I have to do." She nodded, satisfied. "Very well. For the record, I am going to read a few key sections aloud before you sign. I want there to be no ambiguity." She opened the large binder to a marked page, her finger tracing the dense legal text. Article 1, Section A, the grantor. Jack Wilson does hereby irrevocably grant, convey, and transfer all rights, title, and interest in the property described in Appendix A, including all structures and improvements thereon, to the Martha Wilson Conservation Trust, hereinafter referred to as the Trust. She paused, looking at me over the top of the documents. Appendix A is the legal description of your 100 acres in the house. She turned a few pages. Article 2, Section C. The singular and exclusive purpose of the trust shall be the preservation of the natural habitat, the protection of native flora and fauna, and the support of non-invasive environmental research. No portion of the trust's assets, real or otherwise, may be sold, subdivided, mortgaged, or used for commercial or residential purposes that deviate from this stated mission. Her voice was clear and strong, each word a brick being laid in the wall I was building. This was the heart of it, the clause that turned Robert's dream of a subdivision into a legal impossibility. Now, she said, flipping to another section, Article 4, Section B, regarding your role, you, Jack Wilson, are hereby appointed as the lifetime resident trustee. You are entitled to live in the primary residence on the property for the remainder of your natural life, and you are tasked with the day-to-day oversight of the grounds and research activities. She then moved to the next page, and her eyes met mine with a look of shared understanding. This was the gear that would make the trap spring. Article 5, Section D. The Board of Trustees may at its discretion approve the temporary residency of research fellow students or non-compensated volunteers. All such residents are guests of the trust, not of any individual trustee. Their stay is conditional upon their active, undocumented participation in the trust's conservation mission and their strict adherence to all bylaws outlined in this document. The board reserves the right to terminate the residency of any individual who fails to comply with these terms effective immediately. I let the words sink in. Non-compensated volunteers, active, undocumented participation, termination of residency. It was a masterpiece of legal language. It offered a hand of welcome that could turn into an iron fist at a moment's notice. Eliza closed the binder. The remainder of this document details the formation of the board, the financial structuring, and the protocols for the research grants we will eventually offer. It is exactly as we discussed. She looked at me intently. Are you ready? I looked at the photograph of Martha I had brought with me again, which sat on the corner of the desk. I was keeping my promise to her. More than that, I was ensuring her name would be associated with preservation and peace long after I was gone. Robert wanted to turn my legacy into a quick profit. Instead, I was turning it into a fortress that would protect itself long after I was gone. The notary pushed a pen in the signature page toward me. My hand was steady as I picked up the pen. The pen felt heavy, not with doubt, but with the weight of generations, the weight of my grandfather's labor, my father's hopes, and my own life's work. My signature was not the spidery scrawl of an old man. It was the firm, confident stroke of an engineer signing off on his final greatest design. I signed a dozen pages my name, a repeating motif of finality. With each signature, I felt a burden lifting from my shoulders. The anger I had carried was transforming into a sense of profound, righteous peace. When it was done, the notary stamped the pages with a satisfying thud. Eliza gathered the documents, her movements crisp and efficient. It's done, Jack, she said, a genuine smile on her face. I will file this with the county and the state first thing tomorrow morning. As of tomorrow at 900 a.m., the Martha Wilson Conservation Trust will officially exist. You are no longer just a man in a house. You are the steward of a protected sanctuary. I stood up and shook her hand, and then the notary's. Thank you, Eliza, for helping me build something that will last. No, Jack, she said, her grip firm. Thank you for having the vision. As I walked out of the old brick building and into the bustling city, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The trap was set. The legal foundation was unshakable. All that was left was to wait for the quarry, blinded by their own greed and arrogance, to walk right into it. The last 2 weeks of the month were a strange kind of quiet. The installations were completed with quiet efficiency. The solar panels were a dark, silent grid on the roof. The new automated gate at the entrance to the access road stood open, waiting. The small, discreet cameras were nearly invisible among the trees. The house itself held its breath. On the final day of the month, the day of their arrival, I didn't feel nervous. I felt like I did on the morning of a major bridge inspection. All the calculations were done. All the materials were in place. All that was left was for the load to be applied. I sat on the porch in a simple wooden rocking chair, the one I had built myself. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't wringing my hands. I was just sitting, watching the gravel road that wound its way through my trees. At precisely 200 in the afternoon, I heard the low rumble of a heavy engine, the crunch of tires on gravel. A large yellow moving truck lumbered into view, followed by Robert's shiny black SUV. The invasion had begun. The SUV pulled up first. Robert hopped out of the driver's side, a king arriving at a newly conquered castle. He puffed out his chest, put his hands on his hips, and surveyed the property with a broad, proprietary smile. His parents, Gerald and Patricia, emerged from the passenger side. Gerald was a large man, his expensive polo shirt stretched tight over his belly. He had the look of a man who had never done a day of physical labor in his life. He immediately started pointing. "We'll have to clear some of those trees," he announced to no one in particular. "They block the afternoon sun." Patricia was thin and severe with perfectly coiffed hair that looked like it would shatter in a strong wind. She clutched a designer handbag to her chest and eyed my handcrafted home as if it were a rustic shack she was being forced to endure. "I hope the closets are a decent size." She sniffed, her gaze lingering on the porch with disdain. "And the gravel is going to be murder on my shoes." The last person to get out of the car was Sarah. She moved slowly like she was wading through thick mud. She was pale, her shoulders were slumped, and she wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the ground on the gravel her mother-in-law found so offensive. She looked like a prisoner being led to her cell. I didn't move from my chair. I just watched them. I watched as Robert clapped his father on the back, as Patricia whispered something critical in his ear, as Sarah stood apart from them all, radiating misery. Finally, Robert noticed me. He strode over, his smile unwavering. "Jack, there you are, soaking up the last of your solitude." "Hello, Robert," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Gerald, Patricia, welcome." Gerald grunted in acknowledgement. "So this is it. It'll do. The master bedroom has the balcony, you said." "That's right," Robert answered for me. "Best view in the house. I made sure of it." Patricia walked over to one of the porch posts, running a finger along the smooth sanded wood. "It's all a bit brown, isn't it?" she commented. "We'll have to get some painters in here. A nice white or a light gray would really open the place up." They spoke as if I wasn't there. They discussed additions, renovations, and redecorating my home right in front of me. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes pleading with me. She wanted me to say something to stop them to fight, but she didn't understand. The time for fighting with words was over. I simply stood up from my rocking chair. "You must be tired from the drive," I said, my voice calm and welcoming. "Why don't you all come inside? I'll show you around." Robert's smile broadened. He thought this was it. The moment of his complete victory, my final surrender. "Now you're talking, Jack," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. He turned to his parents. "See, I told you he'd come around." I turned and walked toward the front door I had built with my own hands. I could feel their footsteps behind me, the confident stride of Robert, the heavy tread of his father, the hesitant shuffle of my daughter. They were following me right where I wanted them to go. I put my key in the lock and opened the door to their new life. I led them into the main living area, the heart of the house. A large stone fireplace stood on the far wall, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the forest. The afternoon light streamed in, illuminating the room in a warm golden glow. For a moment, they were all silent, taken aback by the simple, solid beauty of the place. The moment didn't last. "Well," Patricia announced, breaking the spell as she swept, her critical gaze over the handcrafted furniture. "It has good bones, I'll give it that. But this is all very rustic. It will need a lot of work to feel like a home." Gerald walked over to the fireplace, patting the solid stone mantel. "I'll mount a big screen TV right here," he declared. "A 75-inch at least. Honey, where did they pack the remote for the satellite dish?" "I don't have a satellite dish, Gerald," I said calmly. He turned to look at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "No satellite? How do you get any channels out here in the middle of nowhere?" "I don't," I replied. "I read." Patricia looked horrified. "No television? What on earth are we supposed to do in the evenings?" Robert, who had been busy on his phone, looked up with an irritated expression. "Dad, it's fine. Nobody watches cable anymore. We'll just stream everything." He turned to me. "Jack, what's the Wi-Fi password?" This was the first test. I looked directly at him. "There is no Wi-Fi." A stunned silence fell over the room. They all stared at me as if I had just told them the house had no running water. "What do you mean there's no Wi-Fi?" Robert asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Are you serious? I have work to do. My mother needs to stream her shows. Did you not upgrade the internet like I told you to?" "I did not," I said. "The basic connection I have is through a small satellite dish on the roof, and it's for email and emergencies only. It's not strong enough for streaming or video calls." "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped, her voice rising. "This is completely unacceptable, Gerald. We can't live like this." Now, Patricia," Robert said, holding up a hand to placate her while shooting me a look of pure fury. Don't worry, I'll handle this. I'll call the cable company first thing Monday morning and have them run a fiber optic line out here. I don't care what it is. We are not living in the dark ages. He looked at me, his jaw tight. I can't believe this. After all the planning, you couldn't handle one simple thing. As if on cue, there was a polite, firm knock at the front door. Everyone turned. I felt a small, satisfied smile touch my lips. Excuse me, I said. I'm expecting someone. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing on the porch was Eliza Morgan. She was dressed in a sharp, dark gray business suit and held a leather portfolio. She looked professional, confident, and completely in charge. Eliza, I said warmly, thank you for coming. Please come in. She stepped inside, her presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the room. Robert stared at her, then at me, a look of suspicion on his face. Who's this? He demanded. We're having a private family moment here. Eliza Morgan, she said, her voice clear and steady as she stepped forward and offered a hand he didn't take. And I'm afraid I must correct you. You're not having a private family moment. You are on private foundation property, and I'm here in my official capacity as legal counsel and chairwoman of the board for the Martha Wilson Conservation Trust. The room went dead silent. Robert's smug expression faltered, replaced by a look of utter confusion. Gerald and Patricia exchanged a bewildered glance. Sarah, who had been hovering near the doorway, looked like she was about to faint. The what? Robert finally managed to say. The Martha Wilson Conservation Trust. Eliza repeated, her tone patient, as if explaining something to a child. She opened her portfolio. As of 9:00 a.m. yesterday, my client, Mr. Jack Wilson, enacted an irrevocable transfer of this entire 100-acre property, including this residence and all other structures, into the ownership of this newly formed state-registered nonprofit foundation. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. I'm sorry, Gerald grumbled, shaking his head. I don't understand all that legal mumbo-jumbo. What does that mean? Eliza turned her calm, professional gaze on him. It means, Mr. Bennett, that you are not standing in Mr. Wilson's house. You are standing in the central research and administrative building of a legally protected nature preserve. Patricia let out a small, strangled gasp. Robert's face had gone from confused to pale. That's not possible, he stammered. This property belongs to Jack. It's his to do with as he pleases. It's his legacy for Sarah. Indeed, Eliza agreed smoothly, and Mr. Wilson has chosen to shape that legacy in a way that honors his late wife. The stated legally binding and exclusive purpose of this trust is the preservation of the natural habitat and the support of environmental science. The charter, which is now a public document, strictly forbids any sale, subdivision, or use of the property for purely residential or commercial purposes. Robert took a step forward, his voice a low growl. You're lying. This is some kind of trick, Jack. What is this nonsense? Tell her to leave. Eliza is not lying, Robert, I said, my voice finally breaking its calm. It felt good to speak to confirm the truth. Every word she has said is the legal truth. The color drained completely from Robert's face as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. The house he had seen as his future country estate, the land he had mentally carved up into profitable lots, had just vanished before his eyes. So what does that mean? Patricia asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. Where are we supposed to live? Eliza looked at her. Well, that brings me to the reason for my visit. The trust's bylaws, which Mr. Wilson helped draft, do have a provision for guests, Article 5, Section D to be precise. It allows for the temporary rent-free residency of individuals who are willing to serve as non-compensated full-time volunteers dedicated to assisting with the trust's conservation mission. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The final door of the trap swung shut. It was the look on Robert's face at that moment that I will never forget. The confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror, all of it finally coalesced into a single explosive expression of pure, unadulterated rage. His carefully constructed facade of the charming, in-control son-in-law shattered into a million pieces. Volunteers, he roared, his voice cracking. He spun around and pointed a trembling finger at me, his face contorted into an ugly mask. You did this. This was all a setup. You were never going to let them move in. You were playing me this whole time. His voice echoed in the high-ceilinged room, the first truly honest sound he had ever made in my presence. It was the raw, desperate cry of a predator who had just realized that the prey he had been stalking had led him step by perfect step right into a cage. And I just stood there calm and silent and watched him begin to rattle the bars. Eliza didn't even flinch at Robert's outburst. She let his shouts echo and fade into a tense silence. Then she addressed the room with the unshakable calm of a seasoned professional. As I was saying, she continued as if he hadn't spoken a word, I am here to help on board our new resident volunteers. I've prepared a welcome packet for each of you. She placed 3 neatly bound documents on the coffee table. They looked official and intimidating. This packet contains a copy of the Trust's mission statement, a detailed map of the preserve's boundaries, and a full list of the bylaws and community guidelines you'll be expected to follow during your stay. Patricia stared at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. This is absurd, she hissed. We are not volunteers. We are family. Legally, Eliza countered, her voice polite but firm. Your relationship with Mr. Weston is personal. Your relationship with this property is now governed by the trust. Allow me to highlight a few of the key guidelines to get you started. She picked up one of the documents, opening it to a marked page. First, let's discuss the labor contribution. As non-compensated residents, each of you is required to contribute a minimum of 20 hours per week of documented work toward the Trust's mission. Gerald, who had collapsed into an armchair, sputtered. Work? What kind of work? The duties are varied, Eliza said, reading from the page. They may include the removal of invasive plant species, maintenance of the perimeter fences and hiking trails, data entry from the wildlife trail cameras, and assisting Mr. Wilson with the upkeep of the native plant nursery he is establishing in honor of his wife. The color drained from Gerald's face. He looked at his soft, manicured hands as if imagining them pulling weeds for the first time. Second, Eliza went on, relentless is our resource conservation policy. As this facility is now entirely off-grid, then all residents are expected to be mindful of their energy and water consumption. The solar and battery system provides for all essential needs, but it has its limits. This means hot water is available for 5 minutes per person per day. Non-essential appliances such as televisions, hair dryers, and extra heaters are not permitted. A full list of prohibited hydro electronics is on page 12. Patricia let out a horrified squeak. I saw her hand instinctively go to her perfectly styled hair. The idea of living without her creature comforts was clearly more terrifying to her than the prospect of manual labor. Third, property integrity. Eliza's eyes briefly met mine. The Trust's charter explicitly forbids any alteration, structural or cosmetic, to any buildings or landscapes within the preserve. There will be no painting, no redecorating, no removal of furniture, and absolutely no clearing of trees. This house is now considered a historical component of the preserve's founding, and its current state is to be maintained in perpetuity. Gerald's jaw, which had been hanging open, snapped shut. I could almost hear the sound of his 75-inch television dream shattering into a million pieces. Fourth, access and logistics, Eliza said, turning the page. For the protection of our nocturnal wildlife, the main access gate at the road is on an automatic timer. It will be locked every evening at 6:00 p.m. and will reopen at 8:00 a.m. There are no exceptions. Furthermore, to minimize ecological disruption, delivery services such as Amazon, FedEx, and all food delivery are not permitted on the property. A mailbox is located by the main gate for standard postal service. The walls of their new home were closing in, becoming a cage. They were being cut off from the world of convenience they had always known. And finally, Eliza said, her voice carrying a note of finality, compliance. As chairwoman of the board, I or another designated board member will conduct weekly inspections to ensure all guidelines are being followed and labor logs are being kept up to date. Failure to comply with any of the bylaws will be considered a breach of your volunteer agreement. A first breach will result in a formal warning. A second breach will result in the immediate termination of your residency status. You will be given a 24-hour notice to vacate the property. She closed the document with a soft, definitive sound. She had built the ID and explained in excruciating detail exactly how the lock worked. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Bennetts were utterly stunned, trapped between the humiliating terms of their stay and the even greater humiliation of admitting defeat and leaving. Finally, Robert, who had been trembling with silent rage, seemed to find his voice. He ignored Eliza completely. He rounded the coffee table and stood directly in front of me, his face just inches from mine. His eyes were wild with fury and disbelief. "Why?" He spat, his voice low and venomous. "Why would you do this after everything I've done for Sarah? Everything we were building? You would destroy your own family over a house." I looked at him. I didn't see a son-in-law. I didn't even see an adversary. I saw a spoiled child who had finally been told no for the first time in his life. I felt no anger, no hatred, only a profound pity and calm. "I haven't destroyed anything, Robert," I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. "I have protected my family and I have protected my wife's memory. Every action I have taken has been a reaction to one of yours." I stood up from my chair so we were standing eye to eye. "You told me your parents needed to be closer to nature. Now they will have that opportunity every single day. You told me that I should get used to sharing. This is me sharing my wife's dream with the world instead of letting you sell it for profit. You told me this house was a great investment for the future, and you were right. It is now an investment in a future where my grandchildren can come and see the legacy of the woman they never met. A legacy of peace and preservation, not greed." He was speechless, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. "You wanted this house, Robert," I said, delivering the final quiet blow. "You just never bothered to read the terms and conditions." The Bennetts did not leave immediately. Pride, or perhaps sheer disbelief, kept them rooted to the spot for 3 agonizing weeks. I did not engage with them. I did not have to. The house, the land, the rules, they did all the work for me. I simply went about my new routine as the resident trustee, observing the slow, inevitable collapse of their arrogance. The first week was a dark comedy of errors. I would watch from my office window as Gerald, dressed in brand new stain-free work boots, would attempt to clear a patch of invasive ivy. He would last no more than 10 minutes before retreating to the porch, red-faced and panting, to complain about the humidity or his bad back. Patricia refused to participate in any task that involved dirt. She spent her first 20-hour work week organizing the foundation's administrative office, which amounted to her sitting in my study complaining about the lack of comfortable seating and attempting to order expensive ergonomic chairs on a credit card that was, of course, declined as the trust had no line of credit. Their evenings were filled with arguments, their sharp, angry voices carrying through the quiet house. They fought about whose turn it was to do the data entry, about the 5-minute showers, about the lack of entertainment. They were prisoners in a paradise they had tried to steal, and they were turning on each other like rats in a cage. By the second week, the comedy had curdled into a bitter resentment. They began to test the boundaries, looking for loopholes. One afternoon, I saw a pizza delivery cart at the main gate. Patricia was there trying to convince the young driver to walk the half-mile up the gravel road to the house. The driver quite reasonably refused. I watched Patricia have a full-blown tantrum by the side of the road, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. On Saturday, Eliza arrived for her first weekly inspection. She was polite, professional, and missed nothing. She noted the unfulfilled labor logs. She pointed out the scorch mark on the back patio where they had tried to use a portable grill, a clear violation of the fire safety rules. She issued them their first formal warning, her voice calm and unwavering, as she explained the consequences of a second breach. I saw the look in Robert's eyes as he watched her. It was the look of a man who was used to being able to charm, bully, or buy his way out of any situation, realizing for the first time that he was facing a system he could not manipulate. The end came on a Tuesday, 19 days after they arrived. Another moving truck, the same one that had brought them here, rumbled up the road. There was no fanfare, just a grim, silent retreat. Gerald and Patricia moved with a sullen bitterness, refusing to even look at me. They piled their boxes into the truck, their dreams of a free retirement home packed away with their unused tennis rackets and fancy kitchen gadgets. Sarah was there. She hadn't come with them, but had driven up separately. I thought at first she was there to help them, but I soon realized she was there for a final confrontation. As I sat on the porch pretending to read a book, their argument erupted near Robert's SUV, a final ugly explosion. "I can't believe this, Sarah." Robert's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet morning air. "After all this, you're not coming with us. You're choosing him over me, over your husband. I'm not choosing him over you, Robert. Sarah's voice was stronger than I had heard it in years. It was shaking, but it was firm. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my own self-respect. For years, I have watched you dismiss my father. I watched you treat him not like a person, but like a bank account, like an asset to be managed. I made excuses for you. I told myself you were just ambitious. But I was wrong. You're not ambitious. You're a user. I did this for us, he yelled. For our future, that land, that house, it was supposed to be ours. No, Robert, Sarah said, her voice dropping, but filled with a new hard strength. It was supposed to be yours. I was just the excuse you used to try and get it. You never cared about what I wanted. You never cared about my father's feelings. You only cared about what you could take. You stood in my father's home, and you let your parents talk about tearing it apart like vultures picking over a corpse. And I stood there and I said nothing. I will never be that person again. There was a long silence. Then Robert laughed a short, ugly, humorless sound. Fine, he spat. Stay here with your old man and his precious bird sanctuary. See what good it does you when you have nothing. He got into the car, slamming the door behind him. Gerald and Patricia followed, not even glancing at their daughter-in-law. The SUV sped down the gravel road, spitting rocks in its wake, followed by the lumbering moving truck. They were gone, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt clean again. After they left, a profound quiet settled over the house. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a healing silence. The air itself felt lighter, cleansed of the tension and greed that had filled it. I stood on the porch, watching the cloud of dust from their departure gradually settle back on the gravel road. My hand rested on the wooden railing I had crafted from a fallen oak on the property. The wood was smooth under my palm, alive in a way that Patricia had never understood. She had seen only its color, too brown, she'd called it. She had missed the story written in the grain, the decades of growth, the permanence of something real. The sound of footsteps behind me broke my reverie. Sarah had come to stand beside me. Her face was pale but composed, her eyes clear for the first time in years. We stood side by side, not speaking, just watching the forest as a gentle breeze stirred the leaves. A pair of cardinals darted among the branches, a flash of red against the green. Martha would have known their patterns, their habits. She would have kept a log of their nesting. They're gone, Sarah finally said, her voice soft but steady. Yes, I replied. I suspect for good. She turned to look at me, her eyes searching my face. Are you sorry? What? I considered the question carefully, not wanting to give her a hasty answer. Was I sorry? Sorry for what I'd done? Sorry that it had come to this? No, I said at last. I'm sorry it was necessary. I'm sorry your husband turned out to be the man he is. But I'm not sorry for protecting what matters. She nodded slowly, turning back to look at the forest. I should be angry with you, Dad. I should be furious that you did this without talking to me, that you essentially disinherited me without warning. I didn't disinherit you, Sarah, I said gently. I protected your inheritance. The trust board includes provisions for you and the children. You'll always have a place here, and they will too. But it will be on the land's terms, not Robert's. A small, sad smile touched her lips. I know. Eliza explained everything to me while they were packing. It's actually quite beautiful what you've done. Mom would have loved it. She would, I agreed. This was her dream, to preserve this place. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I could see the conflict playing across her face, years of manipulation battling with the clarity of the present moment. I'm the one who should be sorry, she finally said, her voice breaking a little. I let this happen. I stood by while Robert disrespected you, while he treated you like you were just holding space until he could take over. I made excuses for him. I told myself it was just his ambition, his drive to provide for us. She shook her head. But it wasn't. It was greed, plain and simple, and I was too weak to see it. You weren't weak, I countered. You were trying to keep your family together. There's nothing weak about that. But at what cost? She asked, a tear sliding down her cheek. I nearly lost you. I nearly let him take all of this away from you. I reached over and placed my hand on hers. He couldn't take this away from me, I said, looking out at the trees. Because it was never just mine to give. It belongs to your grandfather's hard work and your grandmother's dreams and your mother's love. Robert was never fighting me for a house. He was fighting against all of that. It was a battle he was always going to lose. I squeezed her hand gently. Your mother used to say that dignity is the one thing nobody can take from you. You can lose money, you can lose houses, but you can never lose your self-respect unless you willingly hand it over. Don't ever let anyone, not Robert, not anyone make you feel like you have to give away your dignity just to keep the peace. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. I'm not going to, she said. Not anymore. We stood in silence again, the forest alive around us, birds calling, leaves rustling. There was healing in that sound, in that gentle, persistent life. What will you do now? I finally asked. Sarah took a deep breath. I don't know exactly. I'll need to get a lawyer, I suppose, figure out what comes next. She glanced at me. Would it be all right if I stayed here for a few days, just to sort things out? This will always be your home, Sarah, I said, for as long as you need it. She smiled, then a real smile that reached her eyes. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the confident young woman she had been before Robert, the one who had sat on my shoulders at the bridge dedication and asked with awe, Did you build that, Daddy? I'll need to pick up the kids from school, she said, suddenly practical, and get some of our things, but I'll be back for dinner, if that's all right. I'll be here, I said. I'll make your mother's lasagna. She laughed softly, with extra cheese. Is there any other way? She gave me a quick, fierce hug, then headed toward her car. I watched her go, her steps lighter than when she had arrived. Our relationship wasn't magically fixed, but it was on solid ground again, built on truth instead of secrets. I stayed on the porch as the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. The house stood behind me, a quiet testament to a promise kept. The land stretched out before me, a permanent sanctuary of peace. My wife's legacy was safe, my family was healing, and my home, my true home, was finally at peace. The days that followed brought a strange new rhythm to the house. Sarah and the children moved into the 2 bedrooms on the east side, rooms I had designed with them in mind, though I had never expected them to be used so soon or under such circumstances. Emma, my 10-year-old granddaughter, adapted to the change with the resilience of youth. Within a day, she had claimed a corner of the back porch as her laboratory and was cataloging leaves and pine cones with the same meticulous attention to detail that Martha had once shown. Grandpa, she announced one morning, looking up from her collection of stones arranged carefully on an old wooden tray. I think I'm going to be a botanist like Grandma Martha. I smiled, touched by the connection to a grandmother she had never met. She would have loved that, I told her. She used to say that plants have stories to tell if you know how to listen. I'm learning to listen, Emma said seriously. This rock told me it's been here since dinosaur times. 8-year-old Ethan was having a harder time. For him, the change had come as a bewildering disruption. He missed his father, his toys, the familiar comforts of his suburban home. At night, I could sometimes hear him crying softly in his room. Sarah would go to him, and I would hear her gentle voice, soothing, explaining, reassuring. One rainy afternoon, I found him sitting alone on the window seat in the living room, watching droplets trace patterns on the glass, his small face solemn. Would you like to build something with me? I asked, sitting down beside him. He looked up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. Like what? Well, I've been thinking about building a treehouse, I said. Not too high up, just a small platform with railings where you and Emma could have a place of your own. What do you think? Dad says you're the reason we can't go home, Ethan said abruptly, his eyes suddenly fierce. He says you stole our house. I wasn't surprised by Robert's attempt to turn his son against me, but the bluntness of the child's words still stung. I considered my response carefully. Your dad is upset right now, I said gently. And when people are upset, they sometimes say things that aren't exactly right. I didn't steal anything from your dad. This house was always mine, built with these hands. I held out my weathered palms to him. But what I did do was make sure that this land stays protected so that someday when you're all grown up, you can bring your own children here and show them the same trees, the same streams, the same birds that you see now. Ethan frowned, trying to process this. But why can't Dad come here too? Sometimes, I said slowly, adults have different ideas about what's important. Your dad thinks one way and I think another. And right now, those 2 ways of thinking don't fit together very well. Like puzzle pieces that don't match, he asked. Exactly like that, I agreed. It doesn't mean anyone is bad. It just means we see things differently. Ethan considered this, his young face serious. I still miss him, he said finally. Of course you do, I said. He's your dad, and nothing that's happened changes that. You should miss him, and you should love him. He nodded, then looked up at me with a hint of his usual spirit. Can the treehouse have a rope ladder? I think that could be arranged. I smiled. Want to help me draw up some plans? As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into a month, a new family pattern began to emerge. Sarah found a part-time job in the small town 15 miles away, working as an administrative assistant at the local high school. It wasn't the career she had trained for, but it gave her a sense of purpose and independence that she hadn't had in years. I noticed changes in her, small at first, then more significant. She started wearing her hair the way she liked it, not the way Robert had preferred. She laughed more easily. She spoke her mind without first checking to see if her opinion would be acceptable. She was reclaiming herself piece by piece. The legal separation was underway. Robert had hired an aggressive attorney who was demanding half of everything, including a substantial portion of the value of the house and land. Sarah's lawyer, a colleague of Eliza's whom she had recommended, calmly explained that the property was now owned by a trust and was not part of the marital assets. Robert's attorney blustered and threatened, but the legal wall Eliza and I had built held firm. He's furious, Sarah told me one evening as we sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. He really thought he had it all figured out, that he'd end up with the house, the land, everything. Men like Robert always think they have everything figured out, I said. That's their weakness. They can't imagine anyone outsmarting them. She smiled, a small, satisfied expression. His parents aren't speaking to him, you know. They blame him for the whole debacle. Patricia told their friends that they had to leave Florida because Robert promised them a beautiful retirement home on a wooded estate. Instead, they ended up as unpaid gardeners in a shack in the woods, as she put it. They're furious that he convinced them to sell their condo. I couldn't help but chuckle. Karma has a way of coming full circle. It does, Sarah agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I got a call from the school today. They've offered me a full-time position for the fall semester, assistant to the principal. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for her. Are you going to take it? She hesitated. I want to, but Dad, we can't keep living here forever. The kids need their own space, their own home. I need to find an apartment in town somewhere close to the school. A small pang of disappointment went through me, though I had known this day would come. Sarah and the children had brought life back to the house, filling it with noise and energy and purpose. The thought of them leaving of the house falling silent again made my heart ache a little. You know you're welcome to stay as long as you need, I said. The trust allows for my family to live here. I know, she said gently, and I'm grateful. But part of reclaiming my life is standing on my own 2 feet, building something that's mine. She looked at me, her eyes clear and determined. I think it's what Mom would want me to do, and nodded, knowing she was right. Martha had always believed in self-reliance and finding your own path. She would be proud of you, I said. I'm proud of you. Sarah smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. We'll still come out every weekend. Emma would stage a full rebellion if she couldn't continue her scientific research. And the treehouse still needs some finishing touches, I added. Ethan and I are working on a pulley system to lift supplies. As we sat there, the setting sun painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The house would be quieter without them, but it would never be empty. It was filled with purpose now, with the legacy Martha and I had built together, with the promise of future generations coming to know and love this land as we had. Fall came painting the forest in brilliant hues of red and gold. Sarah and the children moved into a small but charming apartment above the town's bookstore. It had wooden floors, tall windows, and a small balcony where Emma immediately set up a container garden. They came out to the house most weekends as promised, and sometimes on Wednesday evenings for dinner. I wasn't alone during the week, though. The trust was flourishing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Dr. Hayes had completed his ecological survey and had been so impressed with the diversity of species on the property that he had requested permission to bring small groups of his graduate students for field research. I had readily agreed, and now, twice a month, a van full of eager young scientists would arrive armed with notebooks and testing equipment. They brought a different kind of energy to the place, curious, respectful, passionate about preservation. They reminded me of Martha with their detailed observations and careful documentation. I enjoyed their company, their fresh perspectives, their genuine appreciation for what the trust was protecting. One crisp October morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing some paperwork when there was a knock at the door. It was Eliza carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a satisfied expression. "Good news," I asked, letting her in. "The best kind," she replied, setting her portfolio on the table and extracting a document. "The state has officially designated the Martha Wilson Conservation Trust as a protected ecological habitat. This means additional legal protections, tax benefits for the trust, and potential grant funding for research and preservation efforts." I felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Martha would have been over the moon. "There's more," Eliza continued. "The university has proposed a partnership. They want to establish a small research center here, nothing that would disturb the ecosystem, just a converted shed where students could process samples and store equipment. In exchange, they'd provide ongoing monitoring and maintenance of the property." "That sounds perfect," I said. "Exactly the kind of stewardship the trust was designed to support." Eliza nodded, her expression softening. "Jack, what you've created here is extraordinary. Most people, when faced with the kind of situation you were in, would have fought back with anger, with lawsuits, with bitter family battles that drag on for years. But you built something positive instead, something that will last for generations. It's, well, it's inspiring." I felt a warmth spread through me at her words. "I just did what I've always done," I said. "I solved a problem with good, solid engineering." She laughed. "The most elegant engineering solution I've ever seen." After she left, I took a walk through the woods. The trees were ablaze with autumn color leaves drifting down to carpet the forest floor in gold and crimson. I followed the small stream that ran through the eastern corner of the property, its water clear and cold over smooth stones. Martha and I had often walked this path together, planning the house, dreaming of our future. She would stop every few yards to point out a plant, a bird's nest, a particular quality of light filtering through the leaves. She saw the world with such clarity, such loving attention to detail. I came to a small clearing where a massive old oak tree stood, its gnarled branches spreading in a great canopy overhead. This had been her favorite spot. We had often brought a blanket and a picnic lunch, spending lazy summer afternoons in the dappled shade. I placed my hand on the rough bark, feeling the solid living presence of the tree. "We did it, Martha," I said softly. "We kept our promise. This place is safe now. It will be here long after we are gone." The breeze stirred the branches overhead, sending a shower of golden leaves spiraling down around me. It felt in that moment like an answer. Winter settled over the land, wrapping the house in a blanket of quiet white. The children were excited about spending Christmas at the nature house, as they called it. Sarah had begun dating again, tentatively, cautiously, a science teacher from her school named Michael, who seemed kind and unpretentious. He would be joining us for Christmas dinner, a prospect that filled Emma and Ethan with curiosity and me with a cautious optimism. Sarah deserved happiness. On Christmas Eve, after the children were tucked into bed, Sarah and I sat by the fire watching the flames dance over the logs. Outside, snow was falling in large, lazy flakes, accumulating on the windowsills and whitening the world. "I filed the final divorce papers today," Sarah said quietly. "It should be official by February." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "He didn't contest it in the end," she went on. "I think his parents pressured him to just get it over with. They're back in Florida now. They bought a smaller condo in a less prestigious community. Gerald's health isn't good. Apparently the stress of the whole situation triggered some heart problems." "I'm sorry to hear that." I said and meant it. I had never wished them ill, any of them. I had just wanted to protect what was mine. "Robert's real estate business is struggling too," Sarah continued. "The economy's taken a downturn, and he made some risky investments that didn't pay off. That deal he wanted to borrow money for, it collapsed completely. If you had loaned him the $50,000, it would have been gone." I thought about how close I had come to saying yes just to keep the peace, just to avoid conflict. How that one decision, that one refusal had been the first domino in the chain that led us here. "Are you okay?" I asked. "With all of it, I mean." She considered the question, her face thoughtful in the firelight. "Yes," she said finally. "I am. For the first time in a very long time, I feel like I'm standing on solid ground. I know who I am again. She looked at me, her eyes clear and direct. Thank you for showing me what it means to stand up for yourself. For what's right. I wish it could have been different, I said. That he had been different. I know, she said. But then we wouldn't be here, would we? This place wouldn't be protected. The kids wouldn't have this incredible connection to nature. Sometimes the hardest paths lead us to the best destinations. I thought of Martha, then of her quiet strength, her unwavering sense of what mattered. I saw that same quality in her, now burnished by hardship but unbroken. My daughter had found herself again. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the world was being transformed by snow, each flake unique, each one adding to the beauty of the whole. Tomorrow the children would wake to presence and laughter. The house would be filled with warmth and light and family. "Merry Christmas, Dad," Sarah said softly. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I replied. In that moment, surrounded by the house I had built with my own hands, the legacy I had protected, the family that was healing and growing stronger, I felt a profound sense of peace. The Martha Wilson Conservation Trust would stand for generations, a testament to love and preservation, to dignity and determination. I had kept my promise. And in doing so, I had built my greatest project yet, not of wood and stone, but of values that would endure, of lessons that would be passed down, of a legacy that couldn't be bought or sold, only honored and preserved. The old oak tree in the clearing would continue to grow, its roots deep in the soil, its branches reaching for the sky. Birds would nest in its boughs, children would play in its shade, and someday, long after I was gone, someone would look up at its mighty crown and know that this place was protected because one man had loved a woman who loved the land. And that was a foundation no one could ever take away. Spring returned to the forest as it always did, bringing with it new life and new beginnings. The trust was thriving, the partnership with the university had been formalized, and a small, unobtrusive research station had been established in a converted garden shed. Graduate students came and went, studying the ecosystem, documenting the recovery of native species, adding their observations to the growing body of knowledge about this special place. Sarah had married Michael in a simple ceremony under the great oak tree. Emma had been the flower girl, scattering petals with scientific precision, while Ethan had carried the rings on a small wooden tray we had crafted together. The guests were few, just close friends, colleagues from the school, and Dr. Hayes, who had become a regular visitor and friend. Robert had not contested the divorce, had asked for no visitation rights with the children. He had moved to Arizona. Sarah had heard starting over with a new real estate venture. Gerald and Patricia rarely called, and when they did, the conversations were brief and stilted. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, but new bridges were being constructed. Michael, a gentle, thoughtful man with a passion for teaching, had connected with the children in ways that surprised and delighted us all. He spent hours with Emma, patiently helping her identify plants and insects. He taught Ethan to fish in the stream, showing him how to release his catch unharmed back into the water. Sarah was blooming in her new life, her confidence growing, her natural intelligence finding expression in her work and in her relationship. She and Michael had bought a small house on the edge of town with a big yard for the children and a short commute to the school. They came out to the trust property most weekends, sometimes staying overnight, sometimes just for the day. As for me, I had settled into my role as resident trustee with a sense of purpose and contentment I hadn't expected. The house was quiet during the week, but it was never lonely. There was always work to be done, always something to observe, to document, to maintain. I found myself keeping a journal, as Martha had once done, noting the arrival of migratory birds, the first bloom of wildflowers, the changing patterns of light through the seasons. One warm May afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, sketching plans for an accessible walkway that would allow visitors with mobility issues to experience the beauty of the forest, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Looking up, I saw an unfamiliar car making its way up the drive, a sleek, expensive sedan that seemed out of place in these rustic surroundings. I set aside my sketch pad and stood watching as the car came to a stop. The driver's door opened, and to my utter astonishment, Gerald Bennett stepped out. He looked thinner than when I had last seen him, his face lined with age and strain. He moved carefully, as if conscious of every step. For a long moment, we just looked at each other across the yard. Then he walked slowly toward the porch, stopping at the foot of the steps. "Jack," he said, his voice gruff, "I wasn't sure you'd be here." Where else would I be? I asked. This is my home. He nodded, glancing around at the property, taking in the changes, the small research station, the new solar panels, the carefully maintained trails. It looks good, he admitted reluctantly. You've done a lot with it. I waited, sensing there was more. Gerald shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling with whatever had brought him here. Patricia doesn't know I've come, he said finally. She'd have a fit if she knew. But I needed to, hell, I don't know, clear the air, I guess. Would you like to sit down? I asked, gesturing to the porch chairs. He hesitated, then climbed the steps and lowered himself into one of the handcrafted wooden chairs. I resumed my seat, waiting for him to continue. I had a heart attack, he said abruptly, 6 months ago. Not a bad one, but enough to make a man think. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. Sarah mentioned you'd had some health issues. He nodded. The doctors said it was stress. Too many changes, too many disappointments. He gave a short, humorless laugh. That's one way to put it, I guess. My son promised us paradise and delivered hell. I said nothing, just listening. We lost a lot, Gerald continued. Not just the money from the Florida condo, though, that was substantial. We lost face with our friends, our social circle. Everyone knew we'd sold our place to move in with our son into this grand country estate he was always talking about. Then suddenly we're back buying a cheaper place with no explanation. He shook his head. Patricia still won't talk about it. But I've had time to think lying in that hospital bed. He looked at me directly for the first time. You outsmarted us, Jack. All of us. Robert was so sure he had you cornered that you just roll over and let him take what he wanted. He never saw it coming. It wasn't about outsmarting anyone, I said. It was about protecting something important. Gerald was silent for a moment, his gaze moving over the forest, the house, the land. Yeah, he said finally. I see that now. This place, it's special. I didn't get it when we were here before. I just saw trees that blocked the sun, dirt that got on my shoes, inconveniences. But it's more than that, isn't it? It is, I agreed. It's a legacy, not just for my family, but for everyone, for the future. He nodded slowly. Robert never understood that kind of thinking. For him, everything has a price tag. Everything can be bought and sold. He gets that from me, I suppose. I taught him that success means accumulating, acquiring, always getting more. He sighed heavily. I'm not sure that was the right lesson. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the forest birds calling, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant gurgle of the stream. I want you to know, Gerald said finally, that I'm sorry for how we behaved. Patricia won't ever say it, and Robert certainly won't, but I can. We were wrong to try to take this place from you. Wrong to assume we were entitled to it. I was taken aback by his apology, something I had never expected to hear from any of the Bennetts. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. He stood up a bit stiffly and I rose as well. I should go, he said. Patricia thinks I'm at a doctor's appointment. I walked him to his car, feeling a strange sense of closure, as if a circle had been completed. As he opened the driver's door, he paused, looking back at me. You know what the strangest thing is, he said. Those 3 weeks we spent here, as miserable as they were, are the last time I remember Robert really talking to us, really engaging. Since then, it's been short formal phone calls, obligatory Christmas cards. It's like he's ashamed to even look at us. We lost more than a house in this whole mess. We lost our son. There was genuine pain in his voice, and I felt a surge of compassion for this man who had been both perpetrator and victim in Robert's schemes. I'm truly sorry about that, I said. Family rifts are painful no matter who's at fault. Gerald nodded, then got into his car and drove away, the sound of the engine gradually fading into the distance. I stood there for a long time after he'd gone, thinking about the strange, unexpected turns life can take, about regret and reconciliation, about the high cost of greed, and the priceless value of integrity. That evening, I called Sarah and told her about Gerald's visit. She was as surprised as I had been. Do you think he'll try to contact us? She asked. The children haven't heard from him or Patricia in over a year. I don't know, I said honestly, but I think he's changed at least a little. Near-death experiences have a way of shifting perspectives. Well, if he does reach out, we'll take it one step at a time, she said. The kids might like to know their grandfather, the real man, not just Robert's father. After we hung up, I sat on the porch watching the fireflies begin to rise from the grass, their tiny lights blinking on and off in the gathering dusk. I thought about the chain of events that had brought us all to this moment. Robert's greed, my defiance, the creation of the trust, the dissolution of one family, and the strengthening of another. None of it had happened the way any of us had planned or expected. Yet here we were. The land was protected. Sarah was happy the children were thriving. Even Gerald had found a measure of peace and understanding. I had built many structures in my lifetime, bridges, buildings, this very house, but none had been as complex or as meaningful as the legacy I had constructed out of Robert's attempted takeover. What had begun as a defensive action, a checkmate move in a game I hadn't wanted to play, had evolved into something beautiful and enduring. The Martha Wilson Conservation Trust would stand long after all of us were gone, a testament to the power of standing firm for what matters, of choosing preservation over profit, of building something that serves a purpose greater than oneself. In the soft evening light surrounded by the forest my grandfather had purchased, my father had nurtured, and Martha had loved, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The cornered old man had not only survived, he had thrived. And in the process, he had created a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Martha would have been proud. And that in the end was all that really mattered.